Okay, hi everyone. Good evening. Welcome. My name is Dr. Paul Zeitz, and I'm coming to you live from Bethesda, Maryland tonight. And today is Wednesday, May 13th, 2020. Tonight, I'm your host on this evening's Facebook Live chat called Waging Optimism. We will be exploring our personal philosophies and political visions for how we manage these challenging times and how we can join forces to usher in a new era of justice. As you may know, I recently published my second book. This is more like a pamphlet called Waging Optimism, Ushering in a New Era of Justice, where I share my personal philosophy on living with self-imposed persistent optimism, or SIPO. I wrote this book because this is my personal struggle. This is like the edge of my growth in order to maintain persistent optimism in the face of circumstances that are unfolding even today. I also share my political vision in the book on ways in which we can address the climate emergency by healing the greed disease that afflicts many people who are running our political and economic systems. So tonight, I am thrilled to be joined by my special guest, Margaret Klein Salamon. Welcome, Margaret. She's on the chat tonight from Brooklyn, New York. Margaret is a clinical psychologist turned climate warrior whose work helps people face their deeply frightening, painful truths about the climate emergency and helps people transform their despair into effective action. Boy, we need you bad right now. Margaret has a bachelor's in social anthropology from Harvard University and a PhD in clinical psychology from Adelphi University. She is also the founder and executive director of the Climate Mobilization, or TCM, which advocates for an all hands on deck, whole of society mobilization to protect humanity and the living world from climate catastrophe. And she has helped pioneer the Climate Emergency Declaration campaign, which has led to more than 1,400 global governments to declare a climate emergency. Amazing. Now, tonight, also, I'm excited to tell you, I think on Earth Day, she published her third book, Facing the Climate Emergency, How to Transform...
First book, 2 essays before that.
Okay, 2 essays, okay. First book, Facing the Climate Emergency, How to Transform Yourself with Climate Truth. You can see I've been reading it voraciously. I've been rereading parts of it. I mean, I'm immersed in this, but it's still helping me expand myself, creating myself to be part of this movement. Her previous essays are also really interesting, called Leading the Public into Emergency Mode and the Transformative Power of Truth. So Margaret, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for the introduction.
Oh, my pleasure. So we're going to get started with a question. In your book, you shared the story about your own kind of climate awakening. I guess you were living in New York City. It was after Superstorm Sandy hit in October of 2012. And that storm caused $70 billion in damage. 60 people were killed in New York and New Jersey. And you talked about seeing a sign and something altered in you. Could you bring us into that moment? Like, what time of day was it? Where were you driving? Was it a cold, wintry day? And what happened inside of you? It would just be great to hear that personal moment. Bring us into the moment if you can.
Sure. My heart sank kind of, because it's a rhetorical question. Of course global warming's the culprit. Why this idea, oh, Hurricane Sandy's a superstorm, and it's wait, what is that? Why is that a thing that we have now? And so it's we can't. I feel like that sign was calling me to be you can't just interpret this on the surface level. You can't just be yeah, superstorm, hurricane, whatever. It's good thing that's over, right? You have to look at what's actually driving this. And yeah, it ratcheted up the level of, it kind of changed things inside me from a kind of vague anxiety to
Yeah.
like, oh wow, the climate emergency is like smashing cities now.
Yes. And you were in the city that got smashed. So
Yeah.
it really brought it home.
Yes.
And it was like a transformative moment in your life, it sounds like.
So there's several kind of key moments, I would say, in my transformation. That certainly was one. Another really important one is when my psychotherapist said to me, she said, "You worry a lot about climate, but you don't actually know much." And I was like, dang, like that's, you can't, I'm whatever, I'm an academic. You can't say I don't know much about something. But the fact is she was right. Because my, up until that point, my kind of fears were, yeah, I had not really looked into science or like what was really going on. I just had a very clear sense that things were not okay. um but so yeah, when she challenged me to do that, then I started like voraciously reading about the climate in order to be able to go back to her and be like, of which I did, I was right. Like you you said you just, because she thought what I think so many Americans think, which is, oh yeah, it's definitely happening, but it's slow, and there'll be like a few inches of sea level rise at 2100 or something. And I came back and I was like, no.
Mm.
And yeah, she came around. um but so that was a really important moment for me, that kind of challenge to really know what I'm talking about and not just have a vague fear. And then the other one that honestly is probably the biggest, the single most impactful thing, is when my good friend said to me, don't start a blog, which is what I was considering. Don't start a blog. Discourse isn't enough. Think, what could you do to actually solve this problem, this emergency?
Yeah.
And that conversation truly was like a before and after in my life. It's never been the same since. I would never go back. And you talk about this in your book too, because it's really about taking responsibility.
Yeah.
Because I had never, I mean, and it's amazing to me how much our society doesn't encourage people to do that. Like I, there's so much, the message is like, oh, go get yours, be ambitious, but like stay focused on yourself, kind of. Whereas the idea of like, you can make such a wonderful contribution to the world, but you just need to be problem focused.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's like also the idea of solving the problem. It's like, of course I want that. Like, I'm so terrified and motivated. So
What are the key facts about the climate emergency that you think all of our viewers should know right now?
yeah, the by far the most important thing is that the climate emergency threatens the global food supply through drought, primarily, but I mean, sure, other things too, but that the basic, most important, most devastating chain of events from the climate is that drought is causing crop failure and food shortages, which are then causing mass internal and international migration, which is then causing state failure. And I mean, it's, the Pentagon calls it a threat multiplier. So it's like these kind of conditions. So like this happened in Syria. They had the longest drought in their history.
Yeah.
All of these subsistence farmers moved into cities because they couldn't survive on their drought-stricken farms anymore. And all that kind of new movement into cities, a lot of people homeless, like very crowded conditions, people, just having trouble meeting their needs. And because, yeah, hungry people don't just like sit there and die. They do things like
They move to find food.
emigrate, or they overthrow their government, or they, so the idea of state failure, I think, is just really, really, really important, because we think about like the impacts of climate. We tend to think of them like, oh, sea level rise, oh, whatever, vector-borne disease, like all kinds of things. But really, the key risk is collapse of our government and society, and just falling into, really violence and chaos.
Yeah. So that evoked a lot of fear and anxiety and grief also. I mean, that you talk a lot about. I really appreciated, when you face the truth, you have to deal with all these complex emotions, fear and grief and other painful feelings. That's part 2 of your book. Can you give us like a story from your own life and your own journey on like when you felt like when the information that you were taking in like evoked fear, and then it paralyzed you and you were like unable to take action? But then also give us an example of when fear, you were able to transform that fear into productive action. That kind of switch is sort of like what I'm really curious about.
Yeah. So I had a funny kind of moment, like a little like trippy, when I was really starting to understand the fossil fuel economy and the system. And it was really kind of like a nightmare type thing, where I was just like, oh my gosh, like this cup was made from fossil fuels, or with fossil fuels, this blazer was made using fossil fuels, like they're everywhere, like and yeah, that felt really scary, just like, because before that kind of realization, I was kind of like, oh, fossil fuels, so like filling up your tank with gas. I'm not naive about that,
Right.
but rather it just doesn't matter, because we need to do everything that we can to try. And some people say, oh no, it's impossible, it's too far gone. Well, maybe, but there's only one way to find out, and that's to actually try. So
well, that gets into like your spiritual zone. You talk about a vital force that is existing, that manifests as a collective desire to protect all life. I thought it was interesting. You talked about these other forces that are out there, and you talked about this vital force that is, part of the possibilities. So I guess, that was. I'm struggling to like figure that one out in my own mind. Like, okay, if there is really a vital force that manifests as a collective desire to protect all life, why are we in the situation where we're on the brink of human extinction? So I think this collectivism, collective perspective, humanity-wide view that I think you have, and that you help us all have with this great book, which I hope everyone will go out and buy. And not only for yourself, buy it for your families and for your neighbors and for everyone to fundamentally understand what's going on right now. So, why isn't this vital force winning right now?
Yeah, good question. So like, just to paraphrase that, yeah, looking at the drive for life, the forces of life, versus the forces of death and destruction, which I think are pretty dang close to the idea of good versus evil. Right? I mean, if there's anything good, it would be like nurturing and protecting all life, and if something is bad, it would probably, destroy life massively. So but I think, and one of the ideas that I talk about in the book that I think is not so widely known, or it's a little uncommon, but is that it's not at all a granted, it's not at all a given that people want to live individually or collectively. Um, and so like I feel like the typical kind of narrative, like way of understanding what's happening, is a lot about greed, which is certainly real. I don't, but I think that, but it's the narrative kind of goes, there's these greedy fossil fuel executives and congress people and bankers and whatever that
Right.
are willing to sell our future for a couple of bucks. They're for their own short-term profits.
Right.
And that's, and I mean, and again, I'm not saying that's not a huge part of what's happening. It is. But I think that really understanding that there's part of us, and I think it's in all of us, but in some people it's like a stronger force, really want to kill and destroy. And they do that, I think, primarily because they're in, so like, I mean, thinking of like the Trump administration, for example. I think they're in such their internal landscape is so painful and bleak, like, and just grim, that the idea of like global collapse and you know billions of people dying and all this starvation and everything, it's kind of feels like like it kind of works. It's not that far off to how bad I already feel.
Mhm.
If
Yeah.
I feel completely and utterly miserable and devastated and just wretched, then like wouldn't like the world being miserable and devastated and wretched and other people feeling that way is like, you know.
Mm. Wow, that's thought provoking. I mean, it's sort of like the challenge that we have is also to help people achieve self-love, and in order to have this collective view of life as we know it. So that's a big lift that we have to rise to, I guess. So again, I apologize. The Facebook thing keeps going on and off, and I'm quickly putting it back on. So uh, we can have a bit of a pause here if you want to grab a sip of water. I'm going to
um,
ask you a couple more questions and then go to Q&A that we have. We have a bunch of questions coming in on the Zoom here, so we'll be able to take your questions soon. Folks that are listening in on the Zoom, please put your questions in the Q&A, and also you can rank the questions. So if people start liking them, then those are the ones that will come to the top of the queue. So we have about over 20 people in the Zoom, and we're back live on Facebook. Hi, everyone on Facebook. Sorry for the interruptions. We have some great folks listening in. Something's going on with my Facebook feed or something. I don't know why this is happening, but anyway, we just bear with it, and I apologize, and we're doing the best we can. So from your education and your own personal work that you've done on yourself, and you made a commitment at some point that you could play a role in helping solve the crisis, you yourself, and you decided to build a movement. You decided to build the climate emergency movement, which is near and dear to my heart. So tell us like a story about like one day you woke up and said, "Hey, I'm gonna launch an organization called TCM, the Climate Mobilization." And did that happen in the shower? Was that at a coffee shop? Like, I'm sure it wasn't one moment, but in my own journey, I've had times where I'm like hemming and hawing. Is this right? Is it wrong? Should I do it? Should I not do it? Like, and then there's like a moment where I just like get like clarity and just go. So like if you could tell us, your story about when you said go, and you put your foot on the pedal of the metal, and about the birthing of the climate mobilization TCM.
yeah. um So after my friend made that challenge to me, and I was like, oh, okay, right. I'm gonna just try and like save everyone. Great. Um, I was really kind of like on fire. Um, like I was ready to leave my PhD program, even though I only had 1 year left.
Wow.
Um, and every single person in my life told me that was a like bad mistake, and I was like, okay, okay. But like during that time, the couple weeks after I made that mental shift, more people in my life than ever any other time reached out to me and told me they were worried about me because I was just like really intense, and like people were just like, what is this, and it took I think me a little while to like whatever calm down, like level off a little bit, and it took my friends and family a little while to just be like, okay, this was sudden, but
Mm.
this is real. um and so yeah, once I had the kind of mission in mind, I, as any good academic or lifelong student does, I initiated a period of intense research, really around like what I mean, a little bit about what is actually happening in the climate and what needs to happen in the climate, but mainly about how do social movements work and how does denial function in our society. I
Mm.
mean, just like what is going on that we are like so close to the apocalypse and yet like no one's talking about it.
Yeah.
Um and and so and so through that research, I became very clear that there was a movement that needed to exist that didn't exist,
Mm.
and it was what the climate emergency movement, but that at its core it would be a movement that told the truth, that advocated for a nationwide and global mobilization of resources and society for this towards this end. And so I knew it had to exist in some form. And yeah, and the climate mobilization has done so many different things during our 5 years of existence. I mean,
Mhm.
different programs, and sometimes people have said, like it's confusing, like what do you guys do? But the reason that is because we just started with that um mission of like, okay, well, we know that this movement doesn't exist, and we're just going to try to kind of start it up as much as we can.
And you were
um
experimenting, right? You were trying to figure out what would take
yeah,
hold, right?
yeah, absolutely. And so I started to write about these ideas after I started all that research, and then I did launch a blog called The Climate Psychologist, but it was all very focused on this idea of this movement needs to exist, advocating World War II scale climate mobilization, etc. And on like, I think it was the first day I launched my blog, it was so soon, Ezra Silk wrote to me
Oh, wow.
and was just like, oh, I really love your work, how can I get involved? And he's the co-founder of the climate mobilization and our director of strategy. So in like the first, definitely the first week, it honestly might have been the first day of launching my blog, I heard from this guy who became a co-founder, and I mean a luminary in
Yeah.
the space. So anyway, I always feel like there's an element that fate is playing in all this,
Mm.
the right people coming in at the right time.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. I mean, Ezra, you talk about it in your book about the victory plan, which I've read, and I really appreciate the vision of it. And like, I think about, I go to bed at night thinking, how do we make this real? What has to happen? What are the conditions in our life that can actually manifest this stuff in reality? I
Right.
really appreciated the chart on page 76 about political paralysis, or what I would call incremental mode, go slow mode, business as usual mode, you call it, and emergency mode, which I thought was really clearly articulated, but I love that it said not in panic mode. So we're talking about being in an emergency mode, but not in fight or flight panic mode. You know, we have to maintain our kind of steady, approach. So that was really useful. All right, so I'm going to ask one more question, and then we're going to go to other people's questions. Okay, we're in this COVID-19 pandemic right now. You talk a lot about the World War II mobilization. You talk about the maximum intensity mobilization, MIM is my acronym for that, to address the climate emergency. And I would love to hear your analysis of what you think is possible or not possible. You know, can the COVID-19 pandemic and the response unleash a maximum intensity mobilization to address the climate emergency? I think that's what a lot of people are trying to figure out right now. So where are your thoughts on that? What's your vision?
I think there's a lot of opportunity. I think there's a lot of barriers, that's for sure. But I think the key opportunities have to do with the amount of like collective learning that's going on right now. Like the public is really getting an education in terms and in a lot of relevant things. But most importantly, the idea that a functioning government protects its people, that is like first and foremost what they're there for, and that as a society we need to value life more than the economy and money. It has been actually really awesome to me to see how much people are willing to do to protect themselves and each other.
Yes.
And it's kind of surprising coming out of, 6 years in the climate space, because it sure doesn't seem like we care about protecting ourselves and each other in terms of the climate. So
right.
So seeing these kinds of drastic responses is really encouraging. I think some other really important lessons that people are learning from COVID have to do with the importance of listening to scientists, what an exponential trajectory looks like, and how when a threat is exponential, it's critically important to address it as soon as possible because it's growing so quickly. And the basic idea that we can and indeed really have to change our lives if that's what's needed for safety.
Yeah.
And look, we can do it. Look, it turns out it's possible. And what's amazing is what people will need to make sacrifices to get to zero emissions. I think that's true. I think it's okay to talk about. But they're not going to be nearly as bad as the sacrifices we're making right now. So
that's an interesting point.
Like, don't worry about it.
Yeah. Interesting. I mean, for me, what I've been feeling is that the COVID-19 has been like a major disruption in everyone's life globally. And there's this global communication web of information that's like this fire hose going on. Like when the oil markets collapsed on Earth Day, I was like, oh my God. Like if I would have told you if I would have called you up on March 1st or any time prior to that and said, oh, Margaret, I think the oil markets are going to collapse on Earth Day 2020, you would have laughed me out of the room. It also it makes like what seems as impossible possible. Like also what you're saying about how we have to change our behavior. And we see that can happen globally in a short, kind of snap when people have the right conditions and the right fear and the right solutions are put forward. It's like, the death and dying is so clear and so in your face with a virus, and the climate emergency is sort of opaque and not as visible, but it's becoming more visible for more and more people. So, so thank you for that inspiration. You also talk in your book about ACT UP, and I'm an AIDS activist as well. And the AIDS activists used to throw blood on the steps of the Capitol, and they would chain the leaders, and then there was all the inside, there was like this relentless pursuit of life, people, that vital force that you were talking about, people wanted to live. So I think it's still like an inquiry that we're on. How do we bring that yearning for the survival of humanity, into the mix? Your book, I know you're committed to all aspects of climate action, but if you could share a little bit about, what you think about the balance between mitigation, adaptation, restoration, all those kind of different priorities. How do we bring the right mix of solutions forward? I'm asking you a lot of easy questions.
Yeah, that's one thing about being in the climate space, is just like the range of things to consider is like, whoa. Okay, so generally, when I go to like some kind of climate conference or something, it's like there's all these different things happening. It's like biking, composting, and soil carbon, biochar, ice, refreeze the Arctic, and on and on and on and on, and stuff that I'm learning new things that I never even heard of, and like there's all of these we call them like climate solutions. And what I like say to these people is like, what I'm trying to do is scale your concept up, your effort up by like 1,000 or more. Like, we are in such absolute horrible shape. Like, our situation is so bad that it's like all solutions deployed at scale as quickly as possible. Focusing on, they're all important, but focusing on mitigation and restoration, because otherwise adaptation is just a temporary drop in the bucket.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, great. So we have 20 or more people on Facebook. We have lots of people watching. So thank you everyone for joining. I'm going to start going to the questions, if you don't mind.
Please.
We have a bunch of open questions here. So Michael Foster is asking, I'd like to hear your thoughts about hosting statewide or national online People's Climate Assembly, like those that were underway in France and the UK. We're trying to launch one here in Washington State this summer. Yeah, thanks. Michael, please email me. I've been looking into that for here where I live in Montgomery County. So I'd love to collaborate with you on that. But go ahead, Margaret. What do you think of that?
I think it's really exciting. I'm not an expert in citizens or climate assemblies. But actually Extinction Rebellion introduced that concept to me. And, but I think I think it's really exciting. And I think we need to stay open or even seek out new concepts like that, because, we need to come from the perspective that, well, what we've been doing has been a horrible failure.
Yeah.
So we need, like, new forms of democracy and citizen participation. Awesome. Yeah. One thing I'll say is, I do think those kinds of convenings should really incorporate a kind of psychological emotional, personal processing element. Because I think otherwise, I mean, you're going to find some very overwhelmed people.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so there's different models for how to go about doing it. There's, facets of what's called deliberative democracy, where there's a random sample of the public that are brought in to set up the citizen assembly. They're given education and facts. I think your point is interesting that they should be given, psychosocial support as they grapple with that information. Then, it's usually advisory in terms of like, okay, they make recommendations, but then what happens to them? So what seems to be the most effective approach is when the government, some level of government, is formally seeking citizens' perspectives, and then the recommendations that get generated from a citizens' assembly have like a receptor to go back to, So I think that's one of the things that is I'm still learning on, trying to figure that out. How do we make, as part of declaring a climate emergency, can a city or a county government or a state government also say that in order to achieve this kind of huge transformation that you're talking about, we have to create a citizens assembly so we actually understand what the public wants and thinks is feasible and possible.
One interesting conversation that I've had with a political insider regarding citizens assemblies that I thought was interesting is he said, the politicians view citizens assemblies as a threat because they feel like, wait, isn't this our job? Like, why,
why are we elected? Yeah.
But I think it can be helpful to try to pitch it to politicians as this assembly can help make your life easier because that stronger climate action is needed than what's on the table now. That fossil fuels and the GOP are going to go super hard after you if you start talking about what's actually needed. So let this group of citizens, push the conversation forward.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, I've sort of been advocating for like the fourth branch of government to be considered the people's branch, and that the people's voice needs to be heard. We certainly knew that from the AIDS response. Like, we didn't wait for the government to figure it out. People mobilized, and people took action to hold the government accountable and put pressure on the government. So what you're saying is aligned with that. It's like smart politicians would use that as a way to generate constructive pressure to create the political space for them to be able to do more, right? So thank you for that. Okay, let's go to the next question. Bruce is asking, we in the US face an accelerating collapse of our various societal systems, like our food supply impacted by disruptions to growers and packers from COVID-19. That's not a question, that's a statement. All right, let me go to his question. How do you see climate change enlightenment being advanced by our COVID experience? We touched on that, but maybe you could give us a bit more on that.
I think, and this is what Paul Gilding said. It's like the Great Disruption is here. So I think, one of the things I viewed myself as fighting for 5 years is the veneer of normalcy that our society has had. Things are fine, go on vacation, plan your retirement, plan your career, plan your family, and it's like, what are all these future plans? Like, what's happening? Really, I've kind of struggled with, I think constructively, but feeling really angry at people for, just living their lives. but not fighting for humanity. And so I think there is definitely an opportunity. Coronavirus has really put a spear in the heart of normal mode, right? Like normal, what's that, right?
Right.
So I appreciate that. Normal was killing us, and it's good that it's not happening anymore.
Yeah. So I'm working with a group called the COVID-19 Emergency Response Group. We just formed in late March, and we're actually trying to affect federal policy. And with all these COVID-19 response packages, like the fourth package or the fifth bill that's being negotiated now, and the prospects for an infrastructure bill, and many members of Congress and many organizations are trying to create the political environment for a green stimulus, so that as we're recovering and we're reestablishing our economy, that we do it with a kind of using it as a green stimulus, if you will, creating green jobs, a green economy, a 21st century economy. So there is that work going on, and I think this is really what I want to ask you about, is like the climate movement to me seems so like fragmented, right? There's like all these parallel things going on, and that's like a part of a broader progressive movement, which is like everyone has their issue area. There's all these kind of siloed parallel efforts that are going on out there, and in some ways we keep losing. We make these incremental gains maybe. What's possible for the way forward? We have an election coming up. I know that you're politically savvy, so and beyond, about like creating, like bringing the movements together, so that you have the health emergency and you have the climate emergency. How can those two movements align or fuse for this critical election year? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so first of all, I think that globally we're seeing a lot of great examples of what you're talking about with the green recovery. The United States is not at the forefront of that, but it's really encouraging to see. South Korea passed a Green New Deal. All these cities, European cities, talking about not reopening all of their roads to cars because making these temporary bike lanes and so forth, and it's like, oh, maybe we'll just keep it like this is so there's definitely room for optimism or inspiration globally.
Didn't New York have 100 miles of roads turned into bike or walking roads in New York City?
I actually don't know.
Yeah, de Blasio passed 100 miles.
Awesome.
Yeah, so it'd be interesting to see if that ever opens up again, right?
Yeah, right. That's right. Exactly. I gotta check that out. So yeah, I think that's big. In the United States, our political situation is, oh God, the climate mobilization endorsed Bernie. I was a big Bernie supporter. I mean, Biden is a tough sell on climate. I mean, the idea that he's still talking positively about gas is really makes me absolutely livid. However, I was very encouraged today to see that the people leading the Biden-Bernie policy task forces have been announced, and on climate, the co-chairs are AOC and John Kerry.
Oh, nice.
And Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez obviously, is the primary spokesperson for the Green New Deal. And she also introduced the Climate Emergency Declaration into the House.
Right.
And John Kerry has an initiative called World War Zero, which calls for a World War II scale response to the climate emergency. It very weirdly and mistakenly calls for zero emissions by 2050, which is like a total misunderstanding of the
urgent
war metaphor.
Yeah.
And really, and of physics, of the war metaphor. I mean, it's honestly, I never want to hear the phrase 2050 again. It's like pointless. It's not
Right.
relevant to what it's like. It's like, why don't we deal with COVID by 2050? You know, like, so anyway, I'm very pleased to see that staff selection. Or
I haven't seen that. That's exciting. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I actually think, you talk in your book about the climate mobilization and a broader climate emergency movement. And you talk about Sunrise and Extinction Rebellion and the Future Coalition, a wide range. And, I feel like that movement and the broader kind of Bernie movement has a real moment here to leverage the Biden campaign and the Democratic Party, because hold back your full throttled support until his climate plan was so bad that it can only get better. But let's push him to make it really great. We need him to be the transformational leader. So there's like this window of opportunity between now and the election, even now in the convention, to really, as I know your movement and our movement is really working on, he needs to do that to win. And so I hope that that is. I know that it sounds like it's happening with what you said. All right, let's go to another. We have a couple more minutes for another question. Let's see. There's people are putting questions in the chat and also in the Q&A thing here online. Okay. Thank you, Chuck. Now, Chuck is asking a tough question. How will you prevent your movement or the climate emergency movement from distracting from other urgent movements targeting COVID, for example, inevitable future pandemics, and getting at the root causes of environmental threats? So that's, why is each movement so resistant, he says, to creating a movement of movements, which is what Naomi Klein called for in the 2014 Global Climate March? That's the nexus that we're all living in right now. So yeah, thank you, Chuck. Any thoughts, Margaret?
Yeah, so I think a really important issue with this, with any kind of movement collaboration, but is priorities. That it's like many groups support each other's work and efforts, but don't necessarily share their priorities. So, which I think that, I mean, we deal with this all the time. It is such an important issue, but many organizations, many progressive organizations take on well, of course we need to talk about housing, and of course we need to talk about prisons, and of course we need to talk about hunger and whatever, human trafficking, and all of these things that are legitimately critically important.
Yeah.
But I think that it is also important for me personally and for the climate mobilization, and I think more generally, but to keep a sense of perspective regarding existential risk, because I think there can be a tendency when trying to build a movement of movements that's all right, we've all got our issues and we all support each other's issues and they're all the same, right? So we'll all just be kind of all issues on equal footing, and we'll kind of pursue it together. But that's hard with the climate emergency. I mean, some of that has happened with the Green New Deal.
Yeah.
Green New Deal brings a lot of different issues together.
Right.
But it's really hard when you feel as I do, and many do, but just that we're up against mass starvation in like a few decades. Like, or I mean, it's already happening now, but like, it's like the collapse of civilization. Like, so realizing the scale and the scope, I feel like is something that has not, even our allies in the movement have not fully reckoned with the scope and scale of the climate emergency. And I don't mean that as like a diss, you know, it's really hard to do. Timothy Morton, author, philosopher, calls it a hyper object, because it's the idea of a hyper object is it's so big that you can't even conceive of it. So you can't see it.
Right.
So anyway, that's it. That's not the answer, but it's at least to try to help explain some of the barriers, challenges.
Yeah, thank you. Folks have been asking for me to just hold your book up one more time. It's called Facing the Climate Emergency by Margaret, Klein, Salamon, How to Transform Yourself with Climate Truth. Please check it out and read it and share it and become part of the climate emergency movement. We need all hands on deck for sure. I'm going to wrap it up in a few minutes now, but I want to ask you one last question. And then, well, I have sort of two last questions maybe. If you had a magic wand, like you had a magic wand that you could wave over reality that we're in right now, what transformation would you bring forward into the world?
So, I mean, can I say,
yeah,
fossil fuel infrastructure and industrial agriculture are magically transformed, and now we've got local agriculture and no fossil fuels?
Sounds good.
Okay.
No fossil fuels, zero. Yeah.
Yeah, but also regenerative agriculture on a local scale. That would be one thing. So yeah, that's the like skip. That's like go straight to the physical manifestations of this change. That
Right.
I want to make the other wand strategy would be collective awakening to the scale and scope of the climate emergency, and now we enter emergency mode and go do the mobilization. So either one.
Yeah, sort of like what WHO did. We have an emergency, and everyone, you know, around the world was like had to change, right? That's what we need. I totally agree with you. Is there anything about the book that you want to share or your journey that I haven't asked you about? Did I miss anything? I tried to cover, you know, the different aspects of the book, but I want to give you a few minutes to share anything that I might have missed.
Yeah, I want to make sure that people know that it's a self-help book. It's a kind of a new genre. It's like a new approach kind of to a self-help book, because most self-help books are like, this book will improve your life. It's going to make you more happy or more whatever, satisfied. But this book is like, this book will help you maximize your impact in order to protect humanity. And it's going to be hard, right? This is painful stuff. This is challenging stuff that demands a lot from us, but like this book can help. And I wrote it, my co-author and publisher and everybody's always like, who is your audience? You need to clarify who is your audience into like a thin slice, kind of. How old are they? What's, you know? And I was like, no, you don't understand. The book is for people who are in pain, that, you know, people who are suffering because of this emergency. And so it's, yeah. So if that describes you.
It could be any age, it could be any geography, it could be any race. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, you know, whatever, people kind of more like me are probably gonna, whatever, resonate on them, like whatever, understand more of the references and resonate in a more whatever holistic way or something. But yeah, it's for everyone. We are actually in this together. This is our one planet with one atmosphere, and we are either gonna sink or swim together.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Margaret. I really appreciate you sharing your journey here tonight, and also, taking your journey, that the personal side of your own life, and also creating it as a guide for all of us. Thank you for being so committed to the cause, and by walking the talk and leading by example. I think that you are like one of my kind of mentors on walking the talk, and I really just appreciate you. And I'm so grateful for what you do every day, and for your voice, and for the ripple effect that you're having. So I thank you, thank you, thank you. Keep going. Go, Margaret. Go, 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 go.
Thank you, and back to you and everyone on the call is, yeah, go, go, go. Could you hold up the book one more time? I want to take a screenshot of this. It's very cool. I love your post-it. This is
I have Martin Luther King back there too. Okay.
Yeah, sure. That's the look of someone who really read a book.
And has lived this journey. So great. Well, thank you so much. Let's connect soon. Stay safe, stay healthy, and you and your family and all your loved ones and everyone in New York. Hopefully you'll have a smooth way forward soon. So thank you. Thanks for joining tonight. Thank you everyone that joined on the webinar, and all of you on Facebook. We're going to post the whole video up on Facebook because it was going on and off. So we'll get that up as soon as we can. Thank you everyone. Have a good night. Peace.